Projekt Guru.
Всем привет! С вами Zak Novak на радиостанции Novorossia Rocks. Welcome to Novorossia Rocks radio station. This is Zak Novak, your American in downtown Donetsk. The program is called Projekt Guru, and Guru is in the house as always. Guru, thank you so much for all the hard work that you do. Andre, my engineer, is on vacation. Let's get right to it. Israeli takeover of Palestinian territory has tripled. Israeli NGO Peace Now has issued a statement, a new statement warning that Israel's trend toward reducing the size of settlement construction has been completely reversed, and that the Israeli government plans more than three times as many housing units as this time in 2015. In the first quarter of 2015, Israel approved 194 housing units. In 2016, that number is 674. Over the course of 2015, planning for 1,665 homes moved forward, which was only a fraction of the 8,606 from 2014. This shift, ironically, reflects the collapse of the peace process in 2014. During that, Israel announced several major settlement expansions meant to placate the far right about the peace talks with the Palestinians. But in 2015, with no talks, they didn't have that excuse. The 2016 shift back towards settlement expansion seems centered on politics as well, with many far-right MPs pushing for a dramatic increase in settlement construction to spite the Palestinians over recent unrest. Guru, you're going to love this. A paid tribute to our Russian volunteers who gave their lives for their brothers in Republika Srpska. On the eve of April 12th in Serbia and the Republika Srpska was paid tribute to the memory of Russian volunteers who gave their lives for the brotherly people. Traditionally, on this day, the largest and most public events were held in the town of Visegrad in the Republika Srpska. Here, on April 12th, 1993, were killed 3 Russians. In their honor was established a memorial. At the ceremony, wreaths on the graves of the fallen volunteers were laid, representatives of the Republika Srpska and other many social movements. As was noted in their speeches, this demonstration is broader than the remembrance of the victims of the Yugoslav wars of the 90s of the last century. The Serbs remember the Russian soldiers who poured blood during First and Second World Wars and in earlier times. The historical relations of Serbia and Russia are unique in that these countries have never fought and were always on the same side. Always remember that, on the same side. The participants of the action expressed support for the current Russian foreign policy actions, particularly in the fight against international terrorism. The U.S. regime making sure ceasefire in Syria collapses, massive weapons, and Plan B. While most people are focusing on the Syrian ceasefire, which has held since February, as an opportunity to negotiate a settlement to the civil war, the U.S. and its vetted rebels are looking beyond it, making plans for the day when it collapses. According to officials familiar with the situation, the CIA has been drawing up a Plan B for the collapse of the peace talks, which will see a massive new influx of U.S. weapons to moderate rebel factions. Again, moderate, in another attempt to shift the war in favor of those groups. If that sounds familiar, it's because the CIA already had programs for arming vetted rebel factions earlier in the Civil War, programs which ended with those groups no more powerful and large amounts of U.S. weapons winding up in the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda's Nusra Front. Plan B, then, is really just America's long-standing Plan A, which has already failed, rebranded with a different letter, because nominally the U.S. has to pretend it believes in the peace process it's so eagerly planning for the collapse of. The same plan, only more so, as officials say the CIA is also planning to send even more powerful anti-aircraft weapons to the rebel factions, with an eye towards shooting down Syrian warplanes. And Russian ones, with Russia now directly involved in the war, providing weapons to shoot down Russian planes seems a deliberately provocative action for the U.S. and ill-timed, since they are supposedly negotiating a deal to team up against ISIS. Though U.S. officials continue to insist that the fight against ISIS is their primary focus in Syria, the import of anti-aircraft weapons reflects the administration's priorities, which has ever involved fighting against Russia. This, my friends, is the Obama Nazi regime. It is not to fight against ISIS. This is against Russia. Let me bring in my lovely co-host Nataliya for more news from Novorossia and around the world.
Military situation of Novorossia. Donetsk and Gorlovka under Ukrainian shelling again. Subdivisions of Ukrainian armed forces restarted shelling of part of Zaitseva controlled by DPR in Gorlovka. It was reported today by the DPR Defense Ministry also that outskirts of Donetsk and Zhabichevo were also shelled yesterday in the evening. About 8 p.m. Ukrainian fighters restarted shelling in Zaitseva. It was reported by the representative of the Defense Ministry. He added that the hostility conducted shelling from positions in village Zhovanka. It was fixed yesterday that 10 mines landed. The information of wounded and destroying is being checked. Earlier yesterday, deputy head of the OSSE mission, Alexander Huk, visited Zaitseva. He announced that cameras will be installed in the village. He left the village at 7 p.m. and after his departure, the shelling started. A representative of the Defense Department of the DPR reported that Ukrainian fighters launched several dozen mines in towns Dokuchaevsk in Donbass. At about 11 p.m. Kiev armed criminals started shelling at the positions of the militia close to the Yasinovata checkpoint also. Today Yasinovata region has been shelled again by armament of 122 mm caliber. At night village Trudovsky in the Petrovsky district was shelled. 40 mines were directed to the village. Dokuchaevsk was severely shelled. 55 mines were launched at it. The information concerning casualties and destroying is being checked now. Genocide of Donbass population is going on. Kiev Junta does not stop. Be reminded that illegitimate Kiev government started genocide and unleashed civil war against Donbass population in spring 2014. In regard to the data of the United Nations, more than 9,000 civilians perished as a result of the conflict. Kiev fighters shelled the village Alexandrovka in Petrovsky district of Donetsk, as a result of which 2 private houses damaged severely. The head of the district Maxim Zhukovsky reported, the village Alexandrovka subjected to shelling last night, 2 populated houses destroyed and 1 civilian wounded. It is necessary to point out that suburbs of Dokuchaevsk, Gorlovka, Donetsk and Yasinovata are severely shelled regularly.
Serbian court finds Nataša Kandić, a human rights activist, for war crimes allegations. Serbia court finds right activists on war crimes allegations. A prominent Serbian human rights activist has been ordered to pay 4,400 euros, that's about $5,000 in compensation to the Serbian Army Chief of Staff for publicly linking him to war crimes committed in Kosovo during the 98-99 conflict. The Humanitarian Law Center said Tuesday that its former head, Nataša Kandić, was fined for violating the honor and dignity of General Ljubiša Dikovic by her allegations that his troops had committed atrocities against ethnic Albanian civilians in Kosovo. Kandić has publicly demanded that Dikovic, a unit commander in Kosovo during the war, be replaced as Serbia's military chief. Dikovic has rejected the allegations and Serbia's war crimes prosecutors have made no charges. Kandić had no immediate reaction to the court's ruling. Let me tell you something, Nataša Kandić. It is you who should face war crimes. It is you who are a Serbian traitor. Guru, really quick, listen to this. NATO will hold its first formal talks in nearly 2 years with Russia on April 20th to discuss the Ukraine crisis and other security issues, the U.S.-led military alliance, the terrorist alliance, said on Tuesday. The date has been mutually agreed, a NATO spokeswoman told AFP after alliance head Jens Stoltenberg, that Nazi Stoltenberg, said last week the 2 sides would shortly hold their first NATO-Russia Council meeting since June 2014. Guru, breaking news. Russian combat helicopter crashes in Syria. A Russian Mi-28N combat helicopter has crashed in Syria. 2 crew members, rest in peace, 2 crew members were killed in the crash, the Russian Defense Ministry has reported. No one shot down the Mi-28N helicopter in Syria, the Russian Defense Ministry said, citing reports from the crash site. UNESCO has approved Russia-submitted resolution on preservation and restoration of palmyra. The Executive Board of UNESCO has approved Russia's submitted resolution on preservation and restoration of palmyra and other cultural facilities in Syria. Russia's initiative was approved unanimously, according to UNESCO Secretariat. Palmyra, which is one of UNESCO's World Heritage list, was recaptured by Syrian armed forces March 27. The city had been controlled by the militants of the Islamic State, which is backed by the Obama regime, terrorist group since May 2015. For less than a year of their Palmyra control, ISIS vandals destroyed the famous Arch of Triumph with the colonnade and other ancient monuments. Russian General Staff Main Operations Director-Chief Lieutenant General Sergei Rutskoy said March 31st that the operation to liberate Palmyra was planned with participation of Russian military advisors. Rutskoy said Russia's aerospace forces made over 2,000 strikes to support the Syrian troops. Besides, the Russian Special Operations Force were involved in the effort to recapture the ancient city. On March 31st morning, Russia's Defense Ministry reported that the first group of international anti-mine center specialists arrived in Syria. Later in the day, the ministry said that the second group of specialists from the inter-service team of the Russian Armed Forces International Anti-Mine Center left the Moscow region for the Kememen Air Base in Syria to take part in the humanitarian effort to clear infrastructure facilities and a historical part of the ancient city of Palmyra of mines. The ceasefire regime took effect in Syria on February 27, shortly before the UN Security Council adopted a resolution supporting a cessation of hostilities. The document drafted by Russia and the United States was backed by all 15 Security Council member states. The ceasefire regime does not cover the Islamic State and Jabhat al-Nusra terrorist organizations, as well as other groups ruled terrorists by the Security Council. 55 years since Yuri Gagarin, the first man who visited space, humankind will always remember Wednesday, April 12, 1961, as one of the brightest days in its history. A mere 16 years after the end of World War II, which left huge areas in the European part of the USSR fully devastated, the Soviet Union shook the world by sending the first cosmonaut into space. Major Yuri Gagarin, 27-year-old officer of the Soviet Air Force, became the trailblazer of manned flights. Sergei Korolyov, the chief designer of the Soviet launch vehicles and spacecraft, wrote later on Gagarin and shown what man was capable of, and that was the most audacious venture. He opened a road to an unknown world for the people, and he imparted to them faith in their own abilities, stimulating them towards more confident and resolute steps. That was a Promethean deed, a TASS flash story on Gagarin's revolution around the Earth, which lasted 108 minutes, turned into the most frequently quoted news story on that day. It inspired people regardless of where the report reached them or on what side of the Iron Curtain they lived. A simple Soviet guy, as Gagarin was often called then, gave a special gift to the people with his frank smile and enchanting openness, right at the time when the Cold War was reaching its climax. His peace mission that began shortly after the flight became almost equally legendary. It took him to more than 30 countries on different continents, putting him in front of country presidents and royal dignitaries, and most importantly, bringing him into contact with thousands upon thousands of rank-and-file people who literally carried him in their arms. In 2011, during celebrations of the Jubilee since Gagarin's flight, the UN General Assembly proclaimed April 12th to be the International Day of Human Space Flight. The Soviet Union started marking Cosmonautics Day on April 12th as of '62. The International Day of Human Space Flight is observed to mark the beginning of space era for the humankind, for the purposes of steady development and influence of the states and nations, as well as for ensuring the exclusively peaceful use of outer space. Yuri Gagarin's daughter, Yelena, who is currently Director General of Moscow's Kremlin Museums, told TASS the memoirs of her father evoke warm feelings in people regardless of what generation they belong to. The name Gagarin sounds like a code word, like a key to communications with foreign partners, she said. It creates an incomparable festive atmosphere and boosts morale. That is how it really is. Gagarin is an asset of heritage for the entire world. President Vladimir Putin pointed out the unifying character of cooperation in space. Space is a sphere of joint activity that makes it possible to forget all the complexities of international relations and to build up our contacts in the most promising fields of high technologies with due regard for the future of our countries and the future of mankind. Hey folks, everybody, as I stress always, be safe, stay on alert, and see you all on Friday. Bye-bye, folks.